let me play some of the judge's comments. First, I got one that will help, I think, the prosecution feel good, and I've got one that's going to help Team Trump feel good, teed up. So the one that might make the prosecution feel good, you tell me, Dave, is he zeroed in for a minute on those Terrance Bradley texts, which there's no question they were diametrically opposed to what he said on the stand. The text to Ashley Merchant, again, for the listening audience, Bradley represented Nathan Wade and had been friends with Nathan Wade and allegedly knew about their affair starting in 2019 and had lots of texts with defense attorney Ashley Merchant saying, yes, it started back in 19 when she left the DA's office and then became a judge. And here are all the people who you might subpoena who probably know. And had a bunch of details. And then when he took the stand, nothing. I don't remember a thing. Who am I? Terrance who? Anywho, the judge seemed to be zeroing in on whether, like, how damning those texts really are and whether they really impeached the testimony that we heard. I'll let him say it in his way, but I was listening to it thinking, well, this is not great for Team Trump. It's SOT 9.
Now we have that, and it's in evidence. And what does Bradley do? He knows that he's put himself in a position that if he testifies truthfully on the witness stand, Your Honor is in a position to be able to find, if you choose to, that both Willis and Wade lied. So what does Bradley do? Look, you were an assistant U.S. attorney. You know how this works when you have witnesses in this situation. Mr. Bradley did everything he could possibly do to evade answering questions. No recollection, couldn't remember, it was speculation. Anything he could possibly say that would cause Your Honor not to believe that Bradley knew when this relationship started. I suggest they were clear-cut lies, and the truth is in Defense Exhibit 26.
And so if we take that view, that he thoroughly impeached himself, that he did not give truthful conduct, what's left standing? Generally, you would see someone who's impeached, perhaps we have some kind of core that you could point back to and say that's the time he was telling the truth. In these text messages, is it ever definitively shown how he knew this and that he actually did know it, other than just a assertion outright? Absolutely. Usually, if a state has a witness that goes sideways, they've got him locked in. They've sat down with a detective and got a full statement. We don't have that here.
But what you have is a text message, which is a prior statement of Bradley that he did on his own, that was not given to him by someone else. The only thing that the court has just noted is, how do we know he wasn't speculating? Because you don't have to accept the fact that he wasn't speculating. The cases that I provided, I think by email yesterday, the first dealing with that, you can disbelieve that testimony and draw a negative inference. That's the Ferguson case. On Lee, the other case, you can simply take the prior inconsistent statement as substantive evidence. It has the same value. And that's what I'm asking you to do, to take what was the unprompted statement in Defense Exhibit 26.
So what was happening there, Dave?
This was the smoking gun for the defense. Mr. Bradley, Terrance Bradley, was supposed to go there and say, they had the affair beforehand. Here are the text messages. I knew about it. But he then decided to go the other way. And he admitted to essentially lying back then. He said, I was just speculating. So he's either lying now or lying then. It reminds me of Frank Pentangeli from Godfather
Pentangelo.
2.
Yeah.
That's right. That's right. Oh, Michael, I don't know. I think differently now. So that was the smoking gun, and the smoking gun misfired. And that is the greatest reason. If you said, Megyn, what's the number one reason why the state should feel confident? It's because the biggest witness for the defense misfired. It was a flop. And now they really don't have much to show an actual conflict, except for Miss Yurdi, who has been, according to the people who support the state, discredited because of her bias. And you have the phone records, which we don't know what's going to happen with them. And you have the cash, which, it smells bad, Phil's right, but there's no proof that wasn't the case, especially when he had the father, the Black Panther, who came in and said, yeah, that's how I taught my daughter. So I'm not sure it gets to the level of actual conflict. And here's the last part. I think the best thing that was been said so far, Megyn, is that this will turn on the standard. If the judge says that it depends, it needs to have an actual conflict, then I think Fani Willis stays. If he says it needs to be an appearance of conflict, then she goes. If the judge says we need to prove that there was a lie, then I think she stays. If it's just, well, is it look bad, some nefarious conduct here, then I think she goes. It depends on the standard that the judge adopts.
He asked them as well about, not only did he say what's the standard, is it actual conflict or an appearance, but then he said proven by what measure? Like, I feel like you, Dave, in your recitation are requiring proof beyond a reasonable doubt that it happened. That's not the standard. The lawyers seem to agree that it's preponderance of the evidence. They have to convince the judge it's 51% more likely, 49% less likely that they had this affair before she hired him and that they engaged in this illegal sort of exchange of money without her disclosing anything. And I think they're there. Preponderance is the easiest legal standard there is. They don't have. All they have to prove is that Terrance Bradley in these texts was saying exactly what Robin Yurti is saying and what we believe, which is that the affair began before. And if you look at these texts, and the judge was talking about admitting the entire texts, all of them, which we talked about yesterday, he didn't necessarily have, but now he may have them. The audience may be familiar with these now, but here's just a couple of examples. Do you think it started before she hired him? Merchant asks Terrance Bradley. Absolutely. Now the state tried to say it's implicitly speculative. She says, do you think it started? And so absolutely this is what I think. He ignored Abate, the state's attorney, the very next line by Terrance Bradley, which is, it started when she left the DA's office and was the judge in South Fulton. He knows it's not speculative. He knows. And then we go on. Here's just a couple of others. Her whole motion alleging it had been going on long before she hired him. Anything in this thing that's not accurate looks good, he responds. And then I talked about this with the audience when the text broke. He volunteers to her, you need to subpoena the original security detail that she had when she first became DA. When was that? 2020. That's Terrance Bradley telling her, you got to get the original, guys. He says it twice. Get the original detail and current, but you really want the guys who were there when she was initially elected. Then finally, in those text messages, the 31 pages of them we have here, he says he doesn't know the name Robin Yurti, but he's trying to think of people who might know about the affair and when it started. And you can hear him thinking, gee, this might be a way to get it. How about you do an open records request of all people hired when she took office and who were fired around June of 2022? If you get that, I'm going to be able to give you a name. Finally, she finds it. And he said she hired a girlfriend. It was like a bestie. It was her place they stayed at. This is a man who, long before 2022, it was all prior to 2022 and prior to her hiring him. He's remembering they were staying at the same home together. And she finds it with that public records request. Is it Robin Bryant Yurti? And he says, that's her. That's the East Point apartment person. She was fired, and goes on to say, she's her bestie. Be careful. She's probably still loyal. This is not a guy who's just speculating. He remembers they were in the same apartment together. This woman knows about the affair, but she's probably not going to give it up to you. And lo and behold, she did give it up, Phil. I mean, the judge takes a look at the whole text messages, like all of them, it's even more damning than the defense brought out on Terrance Bradley and what he knew.
Yeah, the whole discussion about that, and that Abadi was trying to make the point that we don't know how he has this knowledge that he purports to have, but clearly he does. If you're telling Ashley Merchant, and look, these two were collaborating together. He was trying to help Ashley Merchant until very recently. He was trying to help her put together this pleading that was as accurate as it could possibly be and that had as much useful information because he wanted to help her, have a good motion. He told her, go be great. You're a great lawyer, so go be great. And so he tells her who to find. He helps her find Robin Yurti. He suggests that she contact the original security detail because they know about the affair. And so when you look at all of this in its entirety, and even the body said, look, the rule of completeness means all these things need to be considered. The text messages together show that he's got personal knowledge. And I think it doesn't explicitly say I've got personal knowledge, but it's a very reasonable inference that you can make. And when we're talking about the standard of proof that needs to be applied in a courtroom, which is, beyond a reasonable doubt, well, that's the criminal conviction standard. We're obviously not there. Preponderance of the evidence, it's just like the scales just go one way, just a little bit over the other. So you've got the text messages, you've got Bradley's demeanor in court. Let's not forget that the judge gets to consider that as well. And there may be more trouble coming down the road, but that's another story. And then you've got the cell data. So you've got all of this together, I think clearly tilts those scales just even if ever so slightly, but I think it's maybe a lot more than slightly. It tilts the scales in favor of this affair beginning much earlier than Nathan Wade said on the stand, and then he said in his sworn affidavit that he filed with the court. And if he's lying about that, the judge can ignore all of his testimony, every bit of it. Same for Fani Willis, every bit of it. He can ignore it. And then what's he left with? He's left with Yurdy. He's left with the substantive evidence that is the prior inconsistent statements on the text messages. Are they perfect? No, they're not perfect, but that goes to weight, not admissibility. Those text messages.
That's right. That's what the defense was saying. They're saying they corroborate. Yeah. That's what the defense was trying to say. It doesn't rest or fall on those text messages, but they are corroborating evidence to what Miss Yurty said. Here's the other thing, Mike. When I listened to the judge, because you're always trying to read tea leaves, he did get into just how credible Fani Willis might be. There was just like a hint of it. Listen here in SOT 10.
Those are the things that this court can rely upon and say, based on those, again, I find an appearance of impropriety.
Where would be the limiting principle? The district attorney signs every indictment assigned to this courtroom.
No.
Does that mean she's off every case?
No, it would be when
if I found that she's untruthful, is that what you're kind of suggesting though?
You don't have to find, again, I'm not saying you have to find she was untruthful or that Wade was untruthful. You don't have to make a finding of fact that they lied. All you have to do is make a finding of fact that you have genuine, legitimate concerns about their credibility, about their truthfulness. And once you find that, then you can apply Registay and Edwards.
Well, but it's the same principle, though. If I have genuine concerns about her truthfulness on a particular occasion, how do those not spill over into every criminal case a district attorney brings?
Well, it's because she testified under oath, and so did Mr. Wade. They didn't have to testify falsely. They could have testified truthfully. They could have indicated that the relationship, the timing was in fact before Mr. Wade was hired. They chose not to. And in that sense, that dishonesty, that constitutes a violation of their ethical responsibilities. This is not signing an indictment. This is not filing a pleading in which both sides have their own positions. This is a requirement that every witness has to tell the truth under oath. And if they don't tell the truth under oath, or there's a significant concern about their credibility, then they're violating their ethical rules. And as anyone will tell you, as Your Honor already knew from when you were a prosecutor, prosecutors are held to a higher standard.
So, Mike, what was interesting there was the judge seemed to be asking himself, if I find the district attorney of Fulton County lied to me under oath on the witness stand, how bad's it gonna get? How many defendants are about to come in and say, I want to blow up my case, my plea deal, my everything, because the DA is a proven liar? And you could see Sadow dodged. His answer was not responsive to what the judge was asking, but the judge was asking that for a reason. What did you make of that?
Well, I don't think the judge even needs to go that far. I don't think he needs to decide whether Fani Willis's credibility is implicated in every case. I think that the lawyer was correct in arguing that Fani Willis came in and testified under oath in this particular matter, and she's not being truthful in this matter. And so this doesn't necessarily, I don't think it has to spill over to every case in Fulton before the Fulton County DA's office. He can decide on this particular case that Fani Willis was not being truthful, Nathan Wade was not being truthful.
Hey, thanks so much for watching. If you like what you just saw, hit the subscribe button for more clips and full episodes.